Hello and welcome to a CNBC TV18 special. The Ministry of Defence has set a target of achieving a turnover of 1.75 lakh crore rupees in aerospace in defence manufacturing by 2025. They also have a target of achieving 50,000 crore rupees worth of exports by 2029-2030. So how will this be achieved? And what is the budget wish list of India's defence industry and startups as well? Joining us now to talk about this all is Rajendra Bhatia, President of the Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers, Vrinda Kapoor, CEO of Third Eye Tech, Neeraj Gupta, MD of MKU Group, also joining us on the program. Let me begin with Mr. Bhatia first. Mr. Bhatia, give us a sense of what is on top of the industry's wish list for the defence sector for this budget.
Thank you, Prakshit. Thank you for having me on your show. And of course, the wish list, they'll always mange more. But the fact of the matter is that today, if you take a look at what all has happened in the last decade or so, there could be policy measures which have been taken. There are certain initiatives which are being taken afresh. And there's certain, I would say, operationalization of these initiatives, which are the policy directives which have been taken in the past. Let me cover all these in three baskets. The first point is that there are enough policy initiatives which have been taken. They probably need tweaking here and there and some further refinement. But the key point would be to operationalize all this. In fact, if you want a vibrant defense industrial base, which does meet the requirements and to the targets which you laid down, and one more which Raksha Mantri has said some time ago, let me just recount them. First one was reaching a target of 50,000 crores, or what we started at 5 billion plus of exports in the export market. The MOD has now announced that the last year's total defense production in the country was 108,000 crores, out of which approximately 22,000 crores was by the private industry. So keeping these figures in mind, what we are looking at converting 20,000 crores to 50,000 crores and 108,000 to in a very near time to 175,000 and later to 300,000 crores as laid down by our Raksha Mantri. Now, if you take a look at these two so-called vision statements which we have put, on the exports front, private industry has actually shown the way. Today, approximately 65% of all the exports is by the private industry. And it is the private industry which is coming forward to export more and more. If we need to get down to 50,000 crores, I think we need to take some corrective measures in terms of having a framework for what we say government-to-government sales. We already hearing of a word being talked about, MOD acquisition for international transfer by India called Maitri coming into fore. We need a dedicated desk for defense exports in the Exim Bank, and we need lines of credit to ensure that these exports do take off. On the production side, I think what we really need to is to kickstart the various initiatives which are started. We need many more programs to come up in Make One, which should see the light of the day. We should see strategic partnership giving us a fillip going into the certain major programs like the we talked about P75I, which is a submarine program. Programs like these getting a fillip because of what we would say work in progress on strategic partnership and Make One programs in the country. There are many other suggestions, but I would probably revert back to you as we move on in this discussion.
Right. Let me go across to Neeraj Gupta as well. Neeraj Gupta, when we speak about exports, and this is a committee that you lead within the Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers on how to increase the export footprint of India's defence industry. Any specific interventions that you would seek for defence exports, and how do you see the exports increasing in FY25?
First of all, I would like to say that India started with a very, very small base. And if we look at last 6 years of export targets, India has achieved a target of roughly around 21,000 crores, which translates to 32% year-on-year growth. There, I would say few things that have been done right by the government are policy support and reforms, especially on export promotion and liberalizing the licensing or specifying the standard operating procedures for the export licensing, which I can say that today is one of the fastest in the world for India. Then things like IDEX, promoting defense R&D ecosystem, that has been a very welcoming step, and that has also promoted India's defense exports. Third thing, I would say India has really started marketing itself nicely in international exhibitions and fairs and positioning itself well. While going forward, I would say India can utilize defense diplomacy to its advantage today. I would say things like G2G, G2B interactions with friendly foreign countries and using India's geopolitical situation as of today can be a big leverage for India to enhance and to achieve 50,000 crore exports. Second point I would like to mention here is defense line of credits. This can be a wonderful tool as far as line of credits are concerned to reach to the markets which have not been traditional India's customers, or we can enhance our geopolitical situation by using India's line of credit. And this can be done very effectively. Third, investment in R&D. And I would say fourth, collaboration with academia. Fifth, customized solutions. Every international customer requires some kind of tweaking as far as their local needs are concerned. I think when Indian companies can offer customized solution, will also enhance defense exports. Third, adoption of international quality standards is also something that we should be adopting to, and Indian agencies should be there to offer certifications against them. I think these are few steps that will help us in achieving 50,000 crore exports.
Right. Vrinda, when we speak about the startup ecosystem, and we have seen startups like yours, Third iTech, collaborating with General Atomics under the ISET framework between India and the United States. What more can be done for the startup ecosystem, especially when it comes to deep tech? This has been a focus area of the Ministry of Defense. But if we really want to achieve results, how do we ring fence the sector or give more assurances to the startup ecosystem?
Thanks, Parikshit, and thank you for having me. So, to understand that, we first need to really understand the role that deep tech or critical tech is going to play in the defense ecosystem, right? It's going to be a component. It's going to be a component in a fighter aircraft. It's going to be a component in a missile. It's going to be a component on a gun or an ammunition. So I think one of the points that Mr. Gupta just spoke about, which is better integration of the ecosystem, the large companies and the innovation ecosystem, so to call it, the deep tech ecosystem, is really going to be what wins here. So from the government's perspective, how do we incentivize the large companies to try an untested and an unproven commodity? That's one of the policy reforms that we need to think of. The second is the risk appetite around deep tech itself. I mean, while we're hearing more globally about investments into deep tech, if we really look at the Indian landscape, the first couple of years, the first 5 years of existence, the first 5 years of survival become very critical to deep tech companies. And for that, risk appetite from a government perspective has to be increased. From this budget, what we're really looking forward to is the National Deep Tech Research Fund coming online. Right, because that body of 50,000 crores or 1 lakh crores that is now earmarked for this sector, for the government to place long-term bets in this sector, is really what's going to provide a lot of buoyancy to this sector. So we know that this scheme is coming online. It is going to be the ease of disbursement, the ease of accessibility, as well as the repayment mechanism that we really need to see innovation in from the government's perspective in order to take this forward.
Right. That's an important point. You're hoping that the National Deep Tech Policy comes out soon, and ease of implementation would be key. Let me go back to Mr. Bhatia. Mr. Bhatia, when it comes to the contribution of the private sector in terms of manufacturing, defense manufacturing in the country, give us a sense of the kind of growth that you've seen over the years. And if you were to quantify the value of contracts going to the private sector in the defense ecosystem, what would that be like?
Okay, so if you take a look at the growth in the last 5 years, the share of the private industry actually has gone from 17 or 18% to 22%. This is, I'm talking about the total defense production in the country. But if you take a look a little deeper, maybe on the, the defense ecosystem is based, like Brinda also mentioned, on a tierized structure. You have OEMs, you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. When we talk about these production figures, these are production figures of private industry in terms of their being a OEM. Because they have taken direct contracts, and this is how this figure gets captured. Their work which is being done as tier 1 and tier 2, rest of the other places, do not directly get added to this figure. So this figure would be a little higher than the actual percentages which have been mentioned. So gradually we have been increasing overall share of the private industry. In the last 5 years, it has gone from probably 17% to 22%. But if you take a look at exports, exports have been driven by the private industry. And in fact, this year's 21,000 crores exports have practically 65% of the total exports being done by the private industry. So what I'm trying to bring out is that I think private industries come of age. They have started to make a mark in this industry. And today we see a great potential for increasing our production going forward into the future. But what would this require from the government is that we need to be much faster with placing of the orders. What we say, the time for completion of a contract from when the necessity arises to placement of contract today lies anything between 5 to 7 years. I think we need to cut down this time to maybe 2.5, 3 years to ensure that industry is able to see the light at the end of the tunnel in a much shorter time. And they can start investing before time to ensure that they are ready for manufacturing all these products. I would also say that not only this is important for the large industry, this is also very important for the startups.
Right.
Startups tend to start burning their money or putting their money when they see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and tunnel is not too long and too deep. It's a short tunnel and they can see light at the end of the tunnel. And that's exactly what really drives them to come forward with great ideas. IDEX is one such example where government committed itself to placing orders in a reasonable time frame. So I think this needs to be brought into the system, and I think we should be able to give much better results going forward.
Right. Neeraj Gupta, if I were to ask you about the need for synergies between the defense PSUs and the private sector when it comes to increasing exports. There is a target that the Defense Ministry has to increase exports from 106 countries currently to 135 countries in the next few years. How important is a close collaboration between the private sector and DPSUs for that?
I think this is an important subject. And I would say that today there are many areas where DPSUs are very strong at. Today there are many countries where private sector are very strong at. And I think having the understanding of the customer needs and requirements and the local procedures, process and systems is something that is very, very important for India to achieve its targets of 50,000 crores and to take it at the same speed that we have maintained in the last years. So therefore, I would say that this collaboration is extremely important, and wherever private companies are strong, they should take the lead, and wherever DPSUs are strong, they should take the lead in promoting brand India. And a joint consortium approach can also be brought in, where an entire package through defense of line of credit can be offered to a particular country, thereby enhancing our strategic relationship with the country and also promoting defense exports.
Right. That is an important point. Let me go back to Vrinda Kapoor once again. Vrinda, when it comes to startups like Third iTech and the startup ecosystem generally, where do you see the maximum investments taking place? And when it comes to putting the money there or deploying private capex, What kind of policy clarity are you seeking at this juncture for the long term? Because whatever investment you make will not be for a year or two. You would be making that investment for a 10-year period. So what kind of policy clarity or intervention you're seeking from the government in the budget and also over the next few years?
So thank you for that. I think that's an excellent question. So in March of 24, a couple of months ago, the Defence Acquisition Council cleared a series of reforms for startups, right? Where they talked about interim payment stages, to address working capital issues. They talked about, how do you price an IP as a part of a defense acquisition? They talked about how bank guarantees and issues associated with that end up in the working capital crisis for startups. So the good thing that we're looking at here is because this is a sector where so much focus is being given. The government is really doing everything in consultation with industry. We also saw the setup of the Ministry of Defence's Aditi scheme, where grants up to 25 crores are being given now to startups. Something that was unheard of, in the era before 2019, it was inconceivable. What I think the government, what further requirements are there from the government is to be able to fund innovation that looks like moonshots on day zero. Talking about the DARPA model, right? Where is India's answer to GPS? Where is India's answer to technologies that will be deployed in the battlefield in 30 years? Those are the areas where I think the risk averseness of private capital becomes extremely high, and government investment is required to at least get to the first couple of years, where what we call a minimum viable product or a prototype becomes conceivable. There is a huge, I think, from the perspective of the current, the existing startup pool and what scale up for them looks like. As long as there is a sort of a matchmaking or a marriage between the technologies that startups are producing or developing and the final OEMs, whether it's the PSUs or the private companies that need to finally supply these products as order. As long as we're able to create a marriage of those two. An interesting example is something that you see where, for example, in the US, is this concept of a small business set aside. So in the US government, every order that is, say, above $500 million or $100 million has a mandatory 20% small business set aside. What that does is it promotes this equation between the large companies who are eventually delivering the system and the small companies that need to form a part of those subsystems in order to get the entire value chain going. So that's one of the suggestions that we have put forward to MOD, and they've looked at it very positively.
Right. We are going to take a short break on this special program, our budget countdown. We're looking at the defense sector very specifically. When we return, we'll continue this conversation and we'll look at the bottlenecks in the defense sector that need to be removed as well. Welcome back. You're watching CNBC TV18 Budget Countdown. We're focusing on the defense sector. Joining us right now to speak about the budget wish list of the defense industry and what they expect from the Narendra Modi government 3.0 over the next 5 years are Mr. Rajinder Bhatia, President of Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers, Neeraj Gupta, Managing Director of the MKU Group, and the CEO of Third Eye Tech, a defense startup in India, Vrinda Kapoor. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Mr. Bhatia, if I were to ask you about one key bottleneck that you see in the defense ecosystem right now, what would that be? And in terms of deployment of CapEx, how do you see that in the year FY25?
Okay, Prakshit, I'm going to take the liberty and give you not one, but maybe two or 2.5 bottlenecks. The first part is that if we really want to get onto there's a revolution in military affairs which is going on. What we call RMA 3.0 is on our doors. India did miss the bus for the RMA 2.0 and 1.0. We need to be at the forefront of RMA 3.0 as a nation. Now, what does this involve? This needs, we did announce deep technology fund of 1 lakh crores. But they should not go the technology development fund way, which got declared in 2006-07 and got only operationalized 6-7 years after that. We need to operationalize this fund immediately. We need to find a way. We need to have a framework so that this fund can be utilized for real development of technologies in the country. The second suggestion I am going to give, and that actually is that we need to keep a target of rolling out at least 5 to 6 Make-One programs in the next financial year, and at least 1 to 2 strategic partnership programs going forward. These are all large-scale programs which have got the, I would say, the capacity to really give a big boost to the Indian industry. And the third one is that we need to find a way to provide capital at reasonable rates, especially to startups and MSMEs. Today, the cost of capital for them is too high, and we need to really find a way of giving them concessional capital for a long duration, maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years at nominal interest rates.
Right.
That's all from my side, Preksha.
All right. Mr. Gupta, what kind of growth in exports do you expect right now in FY25? And if I were also to ask you, how is the indigenization policy? Just a few days back, the 5th indigenization list of 346 items was notified. Could you give us a sense of what would be the value of components which have been indigenized and are now made locally in India?
So I may not be able to give you the real numbers, but I would say that the positive indigenization list has multi-pronged positive effects. First is, I would say, reduction in import dependence. I think that has been a very, very major, I would say, initiative that has been taken by all the procurement agencies in the way forward. Encouragement to local manufacturing is a second thing that has brought in by the positive indigenization list. And especially, it is giving a boost to MSMEs and startups, and also building the manufacturing ecosystem in the country. Thirdly, I would say that it has given a boost to technological advancement within the country. And I would say that especially it is because of this that the programs like IDEX, Aditi are taking place, and more startups are able to bring in new technologies into country, which otherwise was available at multiple times the cost that we were buying from abroad. Then I would say this list also brings strategic autonomy and is of national strategic importance. By reducing dependency on foreign suppliers, India has enhanced its strategic autonomy and national security. Third, I would say it has also given an economic impact. The way I see it, that by reducing the import dependence and enhancing the local manufacturing, we are directly giving jobs into India. And I believe that each defense item that goes directly into the forces has at least 4 or 5 times multiplier effect. So I think these are the few things that I see as a positive step towards indigenization list.
All right. My final question to Vrinda Kapoor. Vrinda Kapoor, when it comes to collaborations with countries like the United States, ISET, for example, what does this do in terms of connecting the defense industrial base in India with the global value chains? And do you think we need more such partnerships with other nations?
100%. I mean, ISET was a watershed moment for India. Because it was the first time that we were having this kind of a collaboration, which usually is there only between treaty allies, right? The challenge with, at least from a startup or an MSME perspective, of integrating into a global supply chain, right, is that you need the OEM to have a very long-term vision with you. It's something that in the US government parlance, they refer to it as vendor development and sustainment, right? That's something they take up at scale across the entire value chain, from innovation all the way up to, the fighter jet product line. That's where if we're able to find connections into that, that's where we're going to start seeing, growth and acceptance of a lot of subsystems in import. So 100%, I think ISET was a watershed moment for our country on our own trajectory, also in terms of our relationship with the United States. And we need to see more such critical technology initiatives emerge with other countries in the world.
All right. We've run out of time, but thank you very much, Mr. Bhatia, Neeraj Gupta and Vrinda Kapoor for joining us on the program. What our defense ecosystem really needs from the budget and policy interventions over the next 5 years. Thank you once again for joining us. That's all the time we have on Budget Countdown. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.